Welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. I wanted to remake the video because I just realized something at the very end there, and also because I was a little less organized than I would have liked to have been. So, really quick, I thought if I could shrink down the size of the video. It was only half an hour anyways, but I could probably make it a lot shorter because I cut out all that waffling and thinking that I had to do now that I have more fresh in my mind. So, be a better presentation. So anyways, over the last few weeks, because I believe that Messiah is coming soon, I've been trying to get a lot of evidence from the Bible, as much evidence from the Tenakh that I could find to support the 6,000 year prophecy theory. Okay? I firmly believe it to be true. I have a video that I will probably make and upload later tonight or tomorrow, focusing on a lot of very interesting verses from the Tanakh that allude to that prophecy. Okay, and sometimes in very inconspicuous places, right? Places that you wouldn't suspect, I should say. So, but for today, what I'm going to focus on is the Bible timeline, because if you add up all the numbers given to you in the Bible, you'll be given a chronological timeline, and it accounts for a huge chunk of time out of the 6,000 years. And we know about year zero, and we're in 2020 now, so you add 2020 to whatever the Bible gives you, and you're left with a remainder. So a couple of weeks ago, I made a video where I gave my calculations and showed that they agreed with what the rabbis say in Orthodox Judaism, where they say that the fall of Israel to Babylon happened in 403 to 423 BC. Okay, I was on agreement with them. Okay, but sadly, at the end of the day, today, or I should say today, I realized there was a huge conflict with the prophecy of Daniel, because Jeremiah foretold 7 years in Babylon, but then we're told in Daniel is literally there at the beginning of the chapter, and I'll read it here. It says, "In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, have understood by the books the number of years, in that a word of Hashem has been unto Jeremiah the prophet, concerning the fulfilling of the wastes of Jerusalem 70 years. So long story short, saving time, he goes on, praying about this and everything. That's what he's trying to understand, the 7 years. But the angel appears and tells Daniel that the 70 years are 70 weeks of years. It's 490 years. So truly, that's one of the great revelations that I found today with the help of another source. But nonetheless, it's a great revelation. So when Jeremiah was talking about 70 years, more importantly, it's not taking away from there being 70 years, which there still is, but more importantly, God wanted us to know that it was 490 years, 70 weeks of years. Okay, so that's an amazing revelation. The next revelation that I had today was that Nebuchadnezzar only ruled for 2 years according to the Bible. The Bible tells us that, he's only, what verse is that again? Let's search that one up. Nebuchadnezzar, 2 years. In Jeremiah 28:11, and Hananiah speaketh before the eyes of all the people, saying, Thus said Hashem, thus I break the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, within 2 years of days, from off the neck of all the nations. And Jeremiah the prophet goeth on his way. So that was another great revelation that I had. So Nebuchadnezzar, I might have been mistaken, but I think most Gentiles have the concept that Nebuchadnezzar ruled over Israel, the Israelites, for 7 years during the exile and captivity and all of that there, right? But in reality, the Bible says he only ruled for 2. There's another verse that confirms it where it says, in his second year of reign, God basically went after him, right? So Nebuchadnezzar was done in 2 years. Now, if you add up on the AC calendar after creation, what you get is the year 3579. That marks the end of Nebuchadnezzar's second year. And we also know from the Bible, I think it's from Ezra, it says that King Cyrus is the one who rose up and disposed Nebuchadnezzar. So history tries to claim that this occurred in 539 BC, but as we'll see from the timeline that I've put together today here, we can see that this would have occurred in 529 BC. Okay? It's not really much of a difference. It's only a difference, a conflict of 10 years. It's not really worth writing home about, you know what I mean? That also shows that everything in the Bible does fit in with history, and I think that's a great testimony as well. So anyways, so the Bible tells us explicitly that there are 3,579 years from the creation of Adam. Okay, and for example, the Exodus was in 2,668. Abraham was born 1948. I think Enoch was born 622. The temple was created, Solomon's temple, 3,148 after creation. And comparing this to what Orthodox Judaism says in their charts, it's correct as well. The numbers match up because that's what the Bible says. I use the same version that they do, Masoretic and all that. So there are 3,579 years until the end of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the other revelation that I had today is that, and this time I can get there quicker, having said it already, I realized that, these numbers still aren't going to fit, because that's the problem that I had here. Just long story short, I took a few minutes to describe this before, but there's always a contradiction or a conflict or a problem. It wouldn't fit with the 6,000 years, right? Looking at the Orthodox Jewish position, which I was once holding, like as of a couple days ago. Oh yeah, no, the invasion just happened in 403 or 423 BC. Historians just have it wrong. It didn't happen in 586. Then you have a huge conflict, right? That just it throws shadow of doubt on what you're trying to present, right? I wanted to resolve everything, and everything did come together here with what I've thought, right? So history says that in 586 that the Nebuchadnezzar finally overthrew Israel, okay, and that after like a 49, 50 year or so exile with Babylon under his power, that it was in year 539 BC that King Cyrus rose up and disposed him. King Cyrus helped the Jews and all that, right? So those are the dates that history gives us. Now, Judaism wants us to believe, I'm not trying to mock them or anything, I'm just saying Judaism wants us to believe that, and like I said, I agreed with them just a couple days ago, that the temple fell in 403, 423 BC. Okay, so there's a huge difference in time between that and 586, right? That's a huge difference, just to illustrate that. Okay, but what I'm proposing here is that 3,579, the end of Nebuchadnezzar, is 529 BC. Okay, that gives us 75 years. In my previous video, I was wrong because I wrote the number down wrong. When you're doing big numbers, you always have like a 1 trailing here and there. So I ended up with 77 so instead of 75. 75 is a biblical number anyway, so I'm glad I noticed that mistake, right? So at 529 BC, this is where you marry the AC calendar to the Gregorian BC calendar, okay? So, I had to test out all different points where I could match them together, but there was always contradictions and conflicts, right? I'm trying to look for one where everything makes sense, right? So I tested this one out. 529 BC. Okay, so at 529 BC, this would only be a 10-year difference between what historians say, okay, for Cyrus overtaking Nebuchadnezzar. But the fact is, the Bible tells us Nebuchadnezzar only ruled for 2 years. So he did not rule over all Israel for 70 years or 75 years, nothing like that until the fall. Okay, he only ruled for 2 years. So this is where I think historians have, and this is a lesser claim than what everybody else makes, right? So I'm happy with this. But all I'm saying is that historians are a chunk of years off on that little note right there, okay? And all they're basing their opinion on when the, in that period of history is like a few scroll fragments and Herodotus and whatever, right? So fair enough. It's less of an argument than what Orthodox Judaism has to make, because they have to account for like 100 and something, like 180 years or whatever it is. I don't have to account for that much, right? So the fact is, 3577 is when Nebuchadnezzar came in. This was at the end of the 11th year of reign of Zedekiah, according to the Bible. These are all the biblical numbers. AC, from Adam's creation. Okay, so 2 years later is the end of Nebuchadnezzar. That's 3579, like I said. Okay, which would translate to 529 BC. 75 years later, still fulfilling the prophecy that they would spend 70 years in Babylon, 75 still being a biblical number, we precisely come to 454 BC. Now at 454 BC, is when the 490-year prophecy begins according to the angel. And why? Because the angel said when the decree to rebuild Jerusalem goes out, this happened under Artaxerxes and not Cyrus. Okay? Cyrus made the decree, but it did not get acted upon. And it even says so in Ezra and elsewhere, I believe, in more than one place. It says that, they're pleading to the officials, the ones ruling, saying, like, look, nobody helped us to get this done under Cyrus's edict. It was made annulled, you know what I mean, made futile, and under Darius and under this guy. But now Artaxerxes is helping us to get it done. This is the essence of what it actually says. So it truly was, and historically they agree, Artaxerxes in 454, he made that decree. Okay, so that's the start of the 490-year period. And that 483 years, we're told, 69 weeks. And I've checked out the original text, in the interlinear, whatever you call it, comparison, looked at the original words there. And there is no comma and punctuation like Judaism claims. I once compared 5 different Jewish sources, Chabad, Mechon, Mamre, a number of different ones, and they all had different wording for the verses, but yet they all claim to be using the original Hebrew. So that's the problem. But anyways, long story short, the original Hebrew does say 2 and 67, so it's 69 weeks. Okay, whatever it is, it adds up to 69 weeks. But Judaism tries to argue against that. The reason why is because that's 483 years. 483 years from when Artaxerxes sent out that decree come to 29 AD, which is the year that Jesus died. Okay, which would perfectly fit with what Daniel's prophecy in that prophecy says, that at the end of 483 years, cut off is Messiah. Okay, there you go. So Orthodox Judaism admits that those numbers fit for Jesus, but they refuse to accept Jesus, obviously. So what they do is they say that, oh no, Artaxerxes didn't give the decree, it was Cyrus 100 and something years earlier, therefore invalidating Jesus. That's just what I've seen, heard. This is what I've experienced and observed them doing. Okay, so, but what we can see here is that, no, Nebuchadnezzar only ruled for 2 years. King Cyrus, in 529 BC, came up, took the throne from Nebuchadnezzar and all that, and then for the next 75 years, they were still in Babylon and all that, okay? And then in 454, finally, the decree went out to rebuild. Then 490 years transpired, because we're told after the 69th week that there would then be 1 week left, and in the midst of that week, blah 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 would happen, right? So it's 69 weeks, and then the final one of the 70 prophetic weeks. Okay, you see what I mean? So that's 483 first, then the final plus 7 years to get to the 490. Okay, so what we see is that King Cyrus actually came in after the 2 years of Nebuchadnezzar in 529 BC, and then for 75 years they were in Babylon, in the lands and all of that there. And the temple was not officially built until the decree until 454 BC. 483 years later, like Daniel said, the Messiah would be here, but then he would be cut off at the end of the 483. Okay, and in the following week, all these great changes would happen and so forth. Okay, and then Daniel went on to talk about that there'd be desolation, but he doesn't say for how long. But then he says an abomination will be built on the holy place. And we learn from history and also from the New Testament, I'll go there, because it talks about Daniel and all this. It says that it'll be built on the mount, essentially. Okay, so the Dome of the Rock was built on the Temple Mount in 687, 688 AD. And 1260 years later, we come to 1948 AD when Israel was reborn. This is no coincidence, especially when 1948 AC is when Abraham was born on the AC calendar, completely unrelated to the AD Gregorian calendar, right? Pretty striking. And when Abraham was 75 in the year 2023 AC, he left Haran for the Promised Land. And what we see is in Daniel's great prophecy, he said there'd be 1260, the angel told him there'd be 1260 days, but these are prophetic, they're years, 1260 years. And at the end of the 1260 years would be the end of those wonders, or whatever he says. But then there would be another 75 years, because it goes up to 1335. Okay, and he says, blessed is he who makes it to the end of the 1335, you go on to your lot at the end of days. Okay, so 1335 is the overall chunk of time, and that's an additional 75 years. So 75 years after 1948, some say 1947 or whatever, some say Dome of the Rock was 687, not 688, right? And either way, what we're looking at is 2022. Either the start or the end of 2022 and the dawn of 2023, which will be perfect symbolism and parallels with the AC calendar. of events. It's very, very striking. Okay? So, that's one interesting thing. But everything fits together perfectly here now. There's no more conflicts and all that. But what I do have to say, if somebody was to sit down and crack all the numbers that I just mentioned, you would notice it conflicts with 6,000 years. Now, this is the reason why. I had another revelation. The other revelation was because it still doesn't fit with 6,000 years. Okay? Still doesn't fit, even though it best satisfied the Bible and the bit of history that we need to attach the two calendars together. Um, it's not ideal because, it's not fitting with the 6,000. So I thought to myself, well, what if Adam wasn't the first human? What if the 6,000 count actually comes from his son Seth, who would be the first true mortal human? Okay, so long story short, if you stop and think about it, it makes sense, because I'm pretty sure I didn't say that in this video yet. If I did, I apologize. But, if you take Seth as being the first true human, you don't have to worry about a 130-year conflict, because Adam was 130 when he had Seth, right? So that helps with all with the years that you cannot account for still. So if you actually take 130 years off, because you're starting the 6,000 count from Seth, the first true fully human, fully mortal human, born a fully mortal human, right? Adam wasn't even born, right? And he was created, able to be immortal. We're not like that. So he definitely fell from one nature to the lower nature. It's indeniable, I think. So if we look back at the numbers to try and prove my theory here of the timeline, we had 3579 at the end of Nebuchadnezzar, right? After Adam. So simply subtract 130, which gives you 3,449. Okay, so let's go back. This is what I had to correct at the end of my last run, right? So we have 3,449 years, right? 3,449 years after the birth of Seth, the first mortal human, when the clock starts counting. Okay, and then, like I said, that is equal to 529 BC. At 529 BC, we then had 75 years, okay, until the edict to rebuild would occur. And then the edict occurred at 454 BC, so you can add 454 to that. And that gives us a total of 3,978. And then that has brought us to year 0. So at year 0, we know that we have transpired 2020. So we can add 2020 to that. And that gives us 5998, meaning 2 years left. So that's the perfect fit, because like I've always said, according to Daniel's prophecy, the end comes at the end of the 1335, which is the end of 2022. It could be the end of 2021 if the count starts from 1947 and 687. Okay, like I said. So that fits perfectly. And like I said, the only conflict really with history is, I say, Cyrus overthrew Babylon in 529 BC instead of 539. Like, ooh, that's only a 10-year conflict. The only other conflict to mention, the only other one, which I mentioned before, is the bigger issue. But it's still better than all the other propositions that are out there, like from Judaism and all that, right? The only last remaining conflict, and I don't even think historians would argue over 10 years, you know what I mean? Not really. When you get 20, 30 years maybe, but 10 years, I don't even think they would argue. But I still have to admit, the only other thing where it conflicts is where they say that it was in 586 when Nebuchadnezzar overthrew Israel. Okay? Because according to this, he overthrew Israel in 531 BC. And he had only overthrown it for 2 years, as the Bible says, before Cyrus overthrew him. Okay? But then still existed 7 years where Israel had been destroyed. It's not like Cyrus went like that and Israel popped back into existence magically. They were still desolate and all that. They were still in exile. They've been driven out of their lands by Nebuchadnezzar in those 2 years. You know what I mean? A lot of them have been killed by Nebuchadnezzar. So they still were in exile like that. And these didn't have a temple. And the temple didn't happen until Artaxerxes. So if you ask me, this is a perfect matching of everything. I'm really, really happy with this, man. That is... Oh, and what is that difference? Historians say 586. I say what was it? 531. So that's a difference of 53 years. What is it? 55 years. That's a little high, but that's better than 180 something years that I had before when I was trying to use the Orthodox Jewish one. That's better than 220 years like some other Orthodox Jewish chronologies give, right? They say there were 220 years, 219 now or whatever from the end of the 6,000. But no, there you go. Like, again, right? If you want to believe, this was my whole reason for doing all this. Like, I believe there's 6,000 years. I don't believe that we're far from the end. I believe we're at the end. I don't believe we're past the end, because that would contradict the theory, okay, that everybody wants to believe. So what I have proven here again now, even better, okay, that we are at the end, 1 to 2 years away at the absolute most, and it all fits. Bible history and Bible numbers have been perfectly married to archaeological history, okay, with only that conflict of 10 years at that one point, which isn't even worth arguing about, and the 50-year conflict at the other point, which is a little more significant, but still it's not like 100 years or 200 years. So, but when you're talking about how close to the end you are, it's important, right? But I don't think there's any room for argument. I think this goes very, very well, because the overthrow of Babylon by Cyrus is more recent, okay, has better documentation for it, logically, okay, far more documentation for it, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a more authentic and trustworthy date than 586. You see what I mean? So at least I'm close to the 539. My 529 is close to 539. So I think I'm close enough to what history says. And that 50-year difference, I just think, well, look at what history has for their evidence of it being more than 50. You know what I mean? So, or whatever it is. So that's where we're at. But the 6,000 years are accounted for. I already did it earlier. 335. I just did it earlier there, right? I'll just do it again for the conclusion. For anybody who doubted, right? So you have 3449 from Seth. Then you add the 75 years for exile, or whatever you want to call it. Then you add 454. Then you add 2022. You get 6,000 exactly. So that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. So anyways, I'll keep the video short. Thank you all for coming. Sorry for the restart. But I just wanted to clear up that little matter at the end there. Anyways, folks, good food for thought. Very good food for thought. I wanted to fight for this because I knew it had to be true. It had to be true. And I think it's really nice how Daniel's two prophecies, well, it's really one prophecy, is the thing that tied everything together here, right? Because his great prophecy was about, the rebuilding of the temple, be rebuilt during times of distress, which was true, and that Messiah would be cut off at the end of 43. We saw that. Right? I mean, what other great leader called Messiah was cut off then if it wasn't Jesus? You know what I mean? It wasn't Cyrus's decree. That's the only thing Judaism can use to argue against this, is that, oh, it was Cyrus, not Artaxerxes. Right? But even Ezra, maybe I'll read that from the last verse for here. Right? I'll go look that up. Cyrus. Where they complain that Cyrus's edict wasn't carried out. It's in Ezra. I don't know which one is it. Oh, here we go. I think this is it. Oh yeah, Ezra 6:14. This sounds familiar, yeah. It says, "And the elders of the Jews are building and prospering through the prophecy of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah son of Iddo, and they have built and finished by the decree of the God of Israel and by the decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house has gone out till the 3rd day of the month Adar, that is in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king." Now, where's the one where they complain about it? Let's see if I can find that one again. It's got to be in Ezra. Is it 5:17? Or was it this one here? Oh, yeah, Ezra 4. Here we go. verse 5. It says, "And it cometh to pass, the people of the land are making the hands of the people of Judah feeble, and trouble them in building." This is for Cyrus's decree. "And are hiring against them counselors to make void their counsel all the days of Cyrus king of Persia, even till the reign of Darius king of Persia. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, who is Xerxes, in the commencement of his reign," which means the end, "they have written an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Artaxerxes." Okay, so there you go. All of that came to an end. They were complaining at the end of all that they didn't get to build the temple. So Cyrus made the decree, but it never got built. Artaxerxes sent the decree, and it got built under Artaxerxes. Bible proves it. Okay, so 454 BC was when the start of the 490-year prophecy started, which proves Jesus was the Messiah. And it also proves the Dome of the Rock was the abomination. Okay, which also proves that that religion was the final beast that was spoken about. You know, Orthodox Judaism says that the final beast is Rome and all that there, Edom and all that. But Daniel specifically says that the fourth beast is different from all the ones that came before it. Now, Rome is identical to Greece, and Greece was identified as the Horn Alexander. So if Rome was the same looking people, European white Caucasians, in the same geographic region, okay, just a step away from each other, they had the same style of dress, they copied identically their architecture. You couldn't tell a Greek city and a Roman city apart, okay, unless there were flags or something. Okay, they had the same religion, for heaven's sake, the same gods, with Greek names instead of Roman. Everything was identical. Okay, identical. And Daniel said that the fourth beast will not be like the ones that came before it. So how could anybody say that Rome was the fourth beast? So who came after? And think about it too. Greece came out in like 300 and something BC with Alexander. It only stayed for a couple hundred years or whatever. Rome came about after it. Daniel said that when Greece falls, its kingdom will be split up into four. I think those remnants were Rome. Okay, because Rome was part of that kingdom. That was the remnant of it. The people, the religion, the place, the land, it's all the same. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, we know it couldn't be Rome because Rome's the same as Greece. Now, Daniel says it'll be different from all the beasts before it. It'll tear down, trample, and destroy. So it's going to be worse. What other nation, empire was worse than the Romans afterwards? There are a lot of bad ones, but which one had the most global impact and in the biblical lands an impact? That religion that built the Dome of the Rock. Okay, they invaded Israel and Jerusalem, just like Daniel and even Jesus said that would happen. They would surround in encampments and then assail the people. People would try to flee, even if they were pregnant or nursing or on the Sabbath day, and they gave great warning. And Jesus quoted Daniel's warning, right, and said, "This is going to happen after I die. The temple's going to fall, and all this is going to happen," right? So. And he said that, the desolation is going to come, and elsewhere it said that, all these things would happen. So the stark reality is that after Messiah was put to death in 29, at the end of the 483, there was another 7 years in which political things occurred according to Daniel's prophecy. Then that's the end. Then you'd have desolation until an abomination is built. So you had to wait. So that's probably the way that God could prevent mankind from predicting the future at certain years and stuff, because that's an unspecified length of time. It's a variable. You might know there's only 6,000 years, but you don't know the rest of time, so it's a variable, right? Sorry, my throat's gone very, very dry. This might help. So, how much time did transpire? Well, if the temple fell in 69 or 70 AD, and the Dome of the Rock was built in 587, 588 AD. How much time is that? I have my little calculator here. 588 minus 70 is 518. So 518 years after that. So 518 years of desolation. And then the key thing here is when the abomination we built on the Temple Mount. A lot of people try to say it was like these Roman kings, like Antiochus, who came in and did all this and that there, but no, it just definitely isn't. Their times don't fit in with anything. What Judaism tries to say was Cyrus who made the edict, and they try to claim that, look, if you count Cyrus as making the edict, Antiochus and all these other ones fit in perfectly. The only problem is they didn't invade in the BC, they invaded in the AD, right? And it doesn't fit with the timeline. So none of those kings fit. And the Jewish kings would put idols in the temples at times, right? So they did it. That doesn't mean that they were the final, beast and all of that. The reality is it's very easy to put a statue in the temple. But what happened is the temple got destroyed as part of the desolation, like it did before with Nebuchadnezzar, right? And the desolation will go on for an unspecified length of time. And then an abomination will be built on the Temple Mount. So after all the desolation, unspecified length of time, we had that momentous occasion, a very bad one, where that religion invaded the lands, killed, raped, enslaved everybody, severely oppressed them. They were treated like animals, and they built their giant monument on top of the Temple Mount. It's the ultimate desecration to a false and to a foreign god. That is the ultimate abomination. They're not putting a statue in the temple, you know what I mean? The temple's still standing. This is a whole new structure to a different and foreign god that oppresses and condemns them. In Surah 9:30, it says that Jews don't know God, they dishonor God, they put darkness on the knowledge of God. It says that Jews, all in Surah 9:30, it says that they invented the Torah and their law from their imaginations in vain. Okay? It says that they're enemies of God and that God will destroy them. Okay? And in Surah 5, it details how Jews and Christians should be punished for being Jews and Christians. It says that their limbs should be cut off and they should be crucified. Okay? So this is not the religion, some peaceful type of religion that came to help Judaism. It thoroughly, scripturally opposes Judaism violently. Okay? And for that foundation to be built upon the Temple Mount, that is the greatest abomination. The Romans couldn't have been that evil because they allowed the Jews to rebuild their temple. They allowed Jews to get rich in their society and all of that. Right? The Romans are actually quite open to other religions unless they cause social disorder. Right? Like Christians did. Okay? But they were quite cool with the Jews back then. Not in every case, but you got to have a temple. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I just think this edifies all the reality with Jesus as the Messiah. It was pretty hard evidence to come back from. You know what I mean? I'd love to see what any rabbi has to say to that. And some might say, oh, well, if that religion was the final beast kingdom, how does that make sense? Well, stop and look. Daniel said, and I should mention this, Daniel said 1260, right? Because the angel told him 1260. That's 3.5. Do the math. That's 3.5 times. The time is 360. That's 3.5 exactly. What did all the other prophecies in the Tanakh and even the New Testament say? That for 3.5 times, or 42 months, however they put it, for 3.5 times, the nations, or the beast spoken of in Revelation, for example, is that final beast, which is that religion. Okay? It would trample Israel for 3.5 times for 1260 years. So that would be from the Dome of the Rock, when it was founded there, to 1948, when they lost control over Israel, and Jews got Israel back. Perfect fulfillment of the prophecy of the numbers. That's the 3.5 times. And during the 3.5 times, that beast kingdom ruled. It oppressed, it enslaved them. Okay? And the nations also trampled. It all came true, 100%, right? So that's just great, great proof. You see what I mean? Just absolutely mind-blowing proof. So from a Christian perspective, there is no 3.5 years at the end of time with the beast kingdom. It was 3.5 times with the beast, and that's what it was. And more proof of this is in Daniel's prophecy. It says after the beast kingdom, there will be the traces of it, the remnants. That shows you the beast kingdom will end, but it still exists because there's remnants, and those are the remnants that have been afflicting people, the different groups, you know what I mean, doing all that violent, crazy stuff around the world, beheading the people, fulfilling all the prophecies, killing the saints, killing the Jewish people as well, right? Killing the Jews and the Christian saints, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to compare one to the other. All that was fulfilled. And it even says in Revelation that the beast who sits on the whore Babylon, the mystery Babylon, rides the beast, but she hates the beast. Most Christians overlook that. They bitterly hate each other and try to fight each other to death. It says that in Revelation, right? So this mystery Babylon isn't part of the beast. It's actually the enemy of the beast. She's manipulating the beast. So you have to stop and think, who would that be, right? But that's going off topic here. But the beast kingdom was that one. It came up out of the ocean, out of the sea of mankind, right? And that's what it did for the time period. And it was worse than any other kingdom before it. It wasn't Rome. So anyways, that's all I need to say for this video. God bless you all, folks. Take care.